My name is Margaret, and I'm 44 years old. I spent nearly 2 decades as a police officer, dealing with every kind of nightmare people could inflict on each other. I thought I'd built enough armor around my heart to handle anything. But that call from my daughter Emily pierced through all of it. "Mom?" she whispered. Her voice cracked like a child's. Can I come over tomorrow?" There was something off in the way she said it. Emily wasn't the kind of woman who asked for permission to come home. She was independent, confident, and strong-willed traits I'd always been proud of. But now, there was a tremor in her tone that sent every instinct in me on high alert. I asked if everything was all right. She hesitated, then forced out, "We just had a fight, that's all." A fight. The word didn't sit right with me. I could almost hear her eyes darting towards someone else in the room, someone listening. I'd heard that same tone from countless women who sat trembling across from me in the station, saying, "It's nothing, officer. Just an argument." "Emily," I said softly, my grip tightening on the phone. "Are you safe right now?" There was silence. Then, a faint exhale. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry." But I did worry. Because that silence between her words spoke louder than anything she could have said. My training might have ended years ago, but my instincts never retired. After we hung up, I sat motionless for a long time. My coffee went cold. My heart didn't. Emily had been married to Travis for 3 years. On paper, he was the perfect man, well-dressed, polite, successful in finance. The kind of man who brought flowers on anniversaries and smiled just the right way in photos. But I'd never fully trusted him. There was something calculated about his charm. Something rehearsed. I remembered how, during their engagement party, I'd caught him glaring at Emily when she laughed too loudly with her friends. It was a flash so brief I almost doubted I'd seen it. But I'd seen that look before in men who needed control more than love. The next morning, I couldn't shake the unease. I tried distracting myself with housework, but every clatter of a dish sounded like a cry for help. I finally sat down at my kitchen table, staring at my badge tarnished now, but still a symbol of who I used to be. I picked up the phone and called Emily again. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. That's when the knot in my chest turned into certainty. Something was wrong. I looked at the framed photo of Emily on the wall, her graduation picture. Her smile bright and free. I thought about how proud I'd been when she told me she wanted to build her own life, to find love, to have a family, and now that same love might have become her prison. I didn't pack much, just an overnight bag and my old leather jacket. I threw my badge and an old notepad into the glove compartment, out of habit more than anything. I wasn't a cop anymore, but I knew how to think like one. The drive to Emily's house was 2 hours long, but it felt like a lifetime. Every mile was filled with what-ifs that twisted my stomach tighter. What if he's hurting her right now? What if she's too scared to tell me the truth? By the time I reached their neighborhood, the sun was dipping low behind the trees. Their house looked peaceful from the outside, neat lawn, flower boxes, a wind chime softly clinking in the breeze. Too peaceful, the kind of peace that hides chaos behind closed doors. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, watching the front door. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, but from fury. I'd seen too many homes like this where the curtains stayed closed and the smiles were fake. When Emily finally opened the door to greet me, my heart sank. She was wearing long sleeves despite the warm weather. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and when she hugged me, I felt her flinch at my touch. "Mom, you didn't have to come all this way," she said quickly. "I wanted to," I replied, keeping my voice calm. My eyes scanned her face, too pale, too tired. Then Travis appeared in the doorway behind her, wearing that same immaculate grin. "Margaret, what a surprise. We weren't expecting company." His voice was friendly, but his eyes were measuring me, as if calculating how much I'd seen already. "I was just in the area," I lied easily. "Thought I'd drop by for dinner." He hesitated for a fraction of a second before stepping aside. "Of course, you're always welcome." Emily led me inside, hands fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. The house was spotless, too spotless. Everything arranged perfectly, nothing out of place. It didn't feel lived in, It felt controlled. Travis made small talk, asking about retirement, pretending to care. But his tone was laced with something an undercurrent of dominance, the kind I'd heard in interrogation rooms. He bragged about his job, their new investments, their happy marriage. I smiled and nodded, but my eyes stayed on Emily. Every time his hand brushed her arm, she stiffened slightly. Every time he spoke, she shrank a little more into herself. After dinner, when she cleared the plates, I caught a glimpse of a faint bruise on her wrist. It wasn't fresh, but it wasn't old either. My stomach turned. I'd spent years telling other women how to escape men like this, how to find help, but now it was my daughter and that changed everything. I stayed polite until I got back to my car that night. The moment I shut the door, the mask dropped. My pulse was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I looked back at the house one more time. Lights glowing softly through the curtains. A picture-perfect lie. When I hung up that morning, I already knew I wasn't just visiting. I was preparing for a rescue. The moment I arrived, I knew something was terribly wrong. It was subtle, too subtle for anyone else to notice, but after years in law enforcement, I could read unease like a second language. The way Emily's hands trembled when she opened the door, the quick, darting glance over her shoulder before she smiled, the faint redness near her eye concealed with powder, none of it escaped me. "Mom, you made it," she said, her voice bright and brittle like glass ready to shatter. I hugged her, feeling how tense her body was. "Of course I did," I whispered. "Wouldn't miss it for the world." Travis appeared behind her a moment later, that ever-charming grin plastered on his face. He was wearing a crisp button-up shirt and jeans that looked freshly ironed. The picture of suburban perfection, but his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, studied me like a man assessing a threat. "Well, Margaret," he said smoothly. "What a pleasant surprise. Just thought I'd drop by," I replied evenly. "It's been too long." He hesitated, clearly not thrilled by my unexpected visit. I noticed the faint tightening of his jaw before he stepped aside and gestured toward the living room. Come in, come in." Their home was immaculate, almost unnaturally so. The scent of lemon cleaner hung thick in the air, and every item looked positioned by ruler and level. No stray magazines, no misplaced shoes. It reminded me of homes I'd seen in domestic abuse cases, places where chaos reigned unseen, hidden under a mask of order. We sat at the dining table, where dinner was already set. Emily served roasted chicken, green beans, and mashed potatoes, too much food for a casual night. It looked like she'd been preparing all day, maybe to avoid angering him. "So, Margaret," Travis began, pouring himself a glass of wine, "how's retirement treating you?" His tone was polite, but his smile didn't touch his eyes. "It's been peaceful," I said, watching Emily out of the corner of my eye. "Though I miss the work. Sometimes." He chuckled. "I'm sure chasing bad guys loses its thrill after a while." "I suppose it depends on the bad guys," I said lightly. He looked up at me, our eyes locking for just a moment too long. A quiet standoff neither of us acknowledged aloud. Emily cleared her throat, her nervous energy thick enough to choke on. "Mom, I was just telling Travis about the community garden project downtown." I smiled at her, noticing the way her voice trembled when she mentioned it. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. Are you still helping out every weekend?" Her eyes darted toward Travis before she answered. "Not lately. We've been busy." Busy. I knew that. Tone permission-bound, fearful. The rest of dinner passed with hollow conversation. Travis dominated the discussion, telling stories about his job in finance and how he'd recently been promoted. He boasted about his leadership style and how his coworkers needed a firm hand. I'd heard men talk that way before about their teams, their families, their wives, always justifying control as responsibility. When Emily accidentally dropped her fork, Travis's smile faltered. Just for a second. His hand tightened around his glass, and a sharp look passed between them. She immediately apologized, voice small and trembling. I felt my blood boil, but I kept my expression neutral. Years on the force had taught me that confronting an abuser too soon only puts the victim in more danger. After dinner, I offered to help clean up, giving Emily an excuse to step away from him. In the kitchen, Her hands shook as she rinsed plates. "Sweetheart," I said softly. "Look at me." She hesitated, then lifted her eyes, tired, fearful, and desperate. "You don't have to pretend with me," I whispered. Her lip quivered. "Mom, please, not now." I wanted to press her, but I could see the panic in her face. Travis was only a room away, listening. So I nodded. "Okay. Not now." When we returned to the living room, Travis was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. "Everything okay?" he asked casually. "Of course," I said smoothly. "Just catching up on old times." He smiled again, but I saw the suspicion flicker in his eyes. "Good. Emily's been under a lot of stress lately, haven't you, babe?" She nodded quickly. "Yeah, work's been hard." I clenched my fists behind my back. Gaslighting classic. He was planting the seed that her behavior was the result of stress, not fear. When I finally left that night, Emily walked me to the door. Travis lingered behind her, his arm draped over her shoulders like a claim of ownership. I hugged her tightly and whispered, "I'll come by again tomorrow." Her breath hitched. "You don't have to, Mom." "I know," I said quietly, pulling back to look her in the eye. "But I want to." As I turned to leave, Travis gave me that polite smile again. "Drive safe, Margaret. It's a long road back." "I always do," I replied, matching his tone but not his warmth. Once outside, I sat in my car for several minutes, gripping the steering wheel. Through the living room window, I could see them, Emily sitting rigidly, Travis talking animatedly, his gestures sharp and aggressive. The curtain shifted, and for a brief moment, his eyes met mine through the glass. He smiled, a slow, deliberate smirk as if to say, "She's mine now, don't interfere." And in that flash, I saw the monster behind his smile. That night, I waited until the house went silent. Emily and Travis had gone upstairs, and the faint sound of a closing bedroom door was followed by quiet murmurs, then stillness. I lay in the guest room, eyes open in the dark, listening. Every instinct in me, the same ones that once kept me alive on patrol, was telling me that Emily wasn't safe here. The air felt heavy, oppressive. I could almost sense the tension radiating from behind their closed door. My mind replayed the subtle signs I'd seen that day. Emily's trembling hands, the bruise on her wrist, the controlled cleanliness of the house. None of it added up to a happy marriage. It added up to fear. I waited another hour before slipping out of bed. I'd spent half my life sneaking through dark places looking for truth. This was no different. Except now, the truth I was hunting was in my own daughter's home. I moved silently through the hallway, careful to avoid the creaky floorboards. The faint moonlight spilling through the window was just enough to guide me. My first stop was the small office Travis had set up near the living room, a pristine space with neatly arranged papers and a computer that looked almost unused. But perfection always hides mess somewhere. I opened the drawers one by one, searching for something, anything that could confirm my suspicions. Most were filled with bills, files, tax documents, all neat and precise. Then I reached the bottom drawer, locked. I smiled faintly. A locked drawer in a house this clean? That's where the truth always hides. I went back to my room and retrieved a small flathead screwdriver from my overnight bag. Old habits die hard. I always kept tools for emergencies. It took less than a minute to pop the lock. Inside were folders thick, disorganized. Unlike everything else in the house, I pulled one out, and my stomach twisted as I opened it. Photos. Dozens of them. Emily, with bruises on her arm. Another of her crying. One of her standing in front of the mirror with a swollen lip. My hand tightened around the edge of the paper until it crumpled. He'd taken them himself. The angles were too close, too deliberate. This wasn't documentation, it was trophies. Then came the real horror. Beneath the photos were printed screenshots of text messages. His messages, threats disguised as affection. "If you ever embarrass me again, you'll regret it. You made me angry. Don't make me do that again. Remember, no one would believe you. You're just emotional." Each message was like a nail in my chest. I felt rage and guilt twist together until I could hardly breathe. My little girl, my Emily, had been living in fear while I'd been sitting at home thinking she was happy. There were also financial statements showing he'd drained her personal savings account, transferring money into one labeled under his business. I knew exactly what that meant: financial control, another leash he'd tied around her neck. At the bottom of the drawer, I found something else: a small USB drive taped to a folder. I slipped it into my pocket without thinking. My hands trembled as I reassembled everything just as I'd found it, leaving the lock broken but aligned so it wouldn't look tampered with. I took the printed evidence with me and folded it neatly into my jacket pocket. Then I turned toward the hallway, ready to retreat quietly before anyone noticed. But just as I stepped out of the office, a sound stopped me cold. A creak. I froze. At the top of the stairs stood Travis. His silhouette was sharp against the dim light of the hallway. He wasn't wearing a shirt, and his voice came low. Almost too calm. Couldn't sleep? My pulse quickened, but I kept my tone even. Old habits, I said. I'm used to patrol shifts. Hard to turn it off. He leaned against the railing, eyes studying me. Funny, he said. Emily said you quit the force years ago. I forced a small smile. Doesn't mean I forgot how to handle myself. His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, a flicker of irritation. Maybe fear. You know, Margaret, he said slowly. You don't have to worry about Emily, she's fine here. I take good care of her. I stepped closer to the stairs, my voice dropping. Is that what you call it? Taking care of her? His jaw tightened. For a brief second, the polite mask cracked. You should. Get some rest, he said coldly. We've got an early morning. I stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. You're right. Sleep is important. When I reached my room and closed the door, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking with a fury I hadn't felt in years. I pulled the papers from my jacket and spread them across the bedspread, scanning them again just to be sure I wasn't imagining it. Every line, every picture screamed the same truth: Travis wasn't a husband. He was a predator. I looked at the USB drive, turning it over in my hand. Whatever was on it, it would be the final nail in his coffin. But this wasn't something I could handle quietly anymore. I needed help. I grabbed my phone and opened my old contacts list. The name Detective Ron Carter glowed on the screen. We'd worked cases like this together for years. He was one of the good ones. The kind who didn't stop until justice was done. I almost hit call. But then I hesitated. If Travis found out before I had enough evidence, Emily would pay the price. I couldn't risk it yet. Not until I knew exactly how deep his control went. I put the papers back into my bag and lay down, pretending to sleep as the first gray light of dawn crept through the curtains. I could hear movement upstairs: Travis getting ready for work, Emily quiet as a shadow behind him. When she finally came downstairs, her voice was soft. Mom, did you sleep okay? I looked at her and saw exhaustion etched into her face. Not much, I said gently, but I've slept through worse. Travis kissed her on the cheek before leaving for the day, flashing me that same fake smile. When the door closed, I exhaled for the first time in hours. I looked at Emily, my heart aching with love and rage. Sweetheart, I whispered. We need to talk. But before I could say more, I noticed the faintest movement outside, the shadow of a man still watching the house from across the street. He smiled, but his eyes were sharp as glass. The moment I stepped into the hallway, Travis was already there, standing at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, his voice coated in false warmth. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator downstairs. But I could feel the tension vibrating between us like static. Couldn't sleep? He asked casually, his gaze flicking from my face to the office door behind me. I forced a calm breath. Just got up for some water, I said, my tone even. Long day, hard to unwind sometimes. He nodded slowly, though his smile didn't reach his eyes. You always were the curious type, weren't you? I kept my face neutral. Every instinct screamed that he suspected I'd seen something. I shifted slightly, keeping my posture open but strong. Old habits die hard, I replied lightly. When you've spent years walking through dark places, you learn to listen to your instincts. His expression tightened for a split second. You were a cop. Not anymore though, right? The emphasis wasn't lost on me. I met his gaze, steady and unflinching. No. But I still believe in protecting people who need it. He stared at me for a moment longer. The silence stretching. Then, suddenly, he chuckled, a low, practiced sound. You're a strong woman, Margaret. I can see where Emily gets it. There it was again, the polite menace, disguised as charm. He turned and started down the hall, his footsteps slow and deliberate. Try to get some rest, he said without looking back. You'll need your energy tomorrow. When he disappeared around the corner, I exhaled shakily. My hand gripped the railing to steady myself. I'd dealt with men like him before, dangerous, not because of their anger, but because of their control. He didn't act impulsively, he planned. I went back to my room and sat on the bed, the papers I'd taken earlier still tucked safely in my bag. My thoughts raced, not with fear but with strategy. I couldn't confront him outright, it would only make things worse for Emily. What I needed was a plan that kept her safe while gathering undeniable proof of his abuse. The next morning, I woke early to the smell of coffee. Travis was already downstairs, dressed for work, reading the newspaper at the table like any other husband starting his day. Emily moved quietly around him, setting plates, pouring his coffee, her movements careful and mechanical. Morning, Margaret, he said cheerfully. Sleep well? Eventually, I replied, forcing a smile. You two have quite the busy household. He laughed. That's married life for you. Emily didn't look up. Her eyes stayed on the table. When he finally left for work, I waited until the sound of his car faded before turning to her. Emily, I said gently, we need to talk. She froze mid-step, her hands trembling around the coffee mug. Mom, please. Sweetheart, I know. I said softly. I know something's wrong. Her breath hitched, and for the first time, tears welled up in her eyes. She sank into a chair, shoulders shaking. He says he loves me, she whispered. But every time I try to talk, he gets angry. He says I make him do it. I took her hands in mine. Emily, listen to me carefully. None of this is your fault. Love doesn't look like fear. It doesn't silence you. She cried harder, years of quiet pain finally finding a voice. When she could speak again, she told me about the shouting, the isolation, the bruises hidden under long sleeves. Every word tore at me, but I stayed calm, letting her talk. She needed release, not judgment. When she finished, I squeezed her hands. You don't have to live like this. We can get you out safely, but we have to do this the right way. Her eyes widened. The police? He said they wouldn't believe me. I smiled faintly. Then it's a good thing I know how to make them believe you. That afternoon, while Travis was gone, I called my old friend Detective Carter. I told him everything I'd found, the photos, the texts, the financial manipulation. He listened without interrupting, then said, Bring me what you've got. We'll start a file. When I hung up, I turned to Emily. We'll get you somewhere safe first. My house. Then we'll go to the station together. She nodded slowly, still terrified but clinging to hope like a lifeline. We began quietly packing a few essentials, nothing noticeable, just a change of clothes, her documents, her phone charger. I told her to stay calm, to act as if everything was normal. We'd leave early the next morning when Travis went to work, but that evening, the tension was suffocating. Travis came home in a strangely good mood, laughing, chatting, even kissing Emily's cheek at dinner. But I saw it, the slight twitch in his jaw, the occasional glare when she didn't respond fast enough. It was an act, all of it. After dinner, I pretended to be tired and excused myself to the guest room. I left my door cracked just enough to hear them in the living room. His voice was soft but cold. Your mother's asking a lot of questions. Emily's reply was barely audible. She's just worried. You told her something, didn't you? No, I stood up immediately, ready to intervene if I had to. But then his tone changed, eerily calm. You should tell her to leave soon. It's confusing her, staying here. My chest tightened, but I didn't move. I couldn't blow our plan now. A few minutes later, I heard her footsteps on the stairs. She stopped at my door and whispered, "Mom, he's suspicious." I took her hand and squeezed it. "Then we stick to the plan," I whispered back. "No surprises. Just one more night." She nodded and returned to her room. I sat there in the dark, staring at the wall, my mind spinning through every possible outcome. I wasn't a cop anymore, but I was still a mother, and mothers don't need badges to fight for their children. It was time to protect my daughter the way only a mother could, with truth, courage, and unbreakable love. The next morning, I played nice while secretly investigating further. By the time the sun came up, I had already decided how the day would go. I'd put on a smile, drink his coffee, and nod along like nothing had changed, because sometimes survival depends on pretending. Travis might have believed he was in control, but I'd spent too many years studying men like him to underestimate the danger of his calm. When I came downstairs, he was already dressed for work, crisp and pressed, sipping from his mug like the perfect husband. Emily was packing his lunch quietly, her shoulders rounded inward. "Morning, Margaret," he said smoothly. "Sleep better?" "Much better." I lied easily. "Thanks again for having me." "You'll have to stay longer next time. Emily misses you." "I'd like that," I said evenly, though every muscle in my body wanted to throw him out of his own house. As soon as his car disappeared down the street, Emily let out a shaky breath. "He's getting suspicious," she whispered. "I know," I said. "That's why we're doing this now." I placed my phone on the table and called Detective Carter. He answered on the second ring, his familiar voice grounding me. "Morning, Margaret. You ready?" "Ready," I said. "I've got everything, the documents, the photos, even the USB drive." "Good. Bring them in. And Margaret, be careful. If he catches on before we act, it could escalate." "I understand." After I hung up, I turned to Emily. "We'll go in an hour. You pack a few things, just enough to make it look like you're running errands. Nothing big." She nodded, though her hands trembled as she folded clothes into a tote bag. While she worked, I decided to check one more thing. Something had been bothering me about the office, the financial statements. I wanted to understand how deep his lies went. I sat at his computer, which was password protected, but a man like Travis was predictable. I tried Emily's birthday. Nothing. His own? No luck. Then I remembered something I'd seen in his files, a date scribbled in the margins beside a bank transaction. I entered it, the screen unlocked. What I found made my stomach twist. He wasn't just controlling Emily, he was funneling her savings into an account that funded his gambling and personal debts. Dozens of transactions showed money being moved between accounts under shell company names. It wasn't just abuse, it was financial fraud. I copied everything onto the USB drive and printed the latest transactions for Carter. When Emily came back downstairs, she looked at me with red eyes but new determination. "I'm ready, Mom." We left quietly, locking the door behind us. I didn't breathe until we were 3 blocks away. Only then did I allow myself to exhale. At the station, Carter met us in a small private office. He looked older than I, remembered grayer hair, tired eyes, but the same steady presence that used to make victims feel safe. He examined the photos and documents without speaking, his expression darkening with each page. "You did good, Margaret. This is more than enough for a warrant, but we'll need to move fast." Emily sat beside me, holding her cup of coffee with both hands. She looked small, fragile, but there was a quiet fire behind her fear. "What happens now?" she asked. Carter leaned forward. "We'll file for a restraining order first thing. After that, we'll get a warrant to seize his electronics and financial records. Once we have those, he won't be able to touch you or your money again." Tears filled her eyes. "I can't believe it's really happening." I put my arm around her. "It's happening because you were brave enough to tell the truth." We stayed at the station most of the day, signing statements, organizing evidence, and setting plans in motion. By the time we left, the sun was dipping low, streaking the sky with orange and pink. Emily was exhausted, but lighter somehow, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. When we pulled up to my house later that evening, she looked around quietly. "I haven't been here since before the wedding," she murmured. "I know," I said softly. "You're safe here now." Inside, I made her favorite dinner, chicken soup and garlic bread. We sat at the table together, not talking much, just sharing silence that didn't hurt. It felt like breathing for the first time in years. After dinner, she went to take a shower while I called Carter again. "Any movement on his end?" I asked. "Not yet," he said. "But we're monitoring. We'll serve the papers in the morning. He'll be notified officially before noon." "Good," I said. "He won't know where she is." As I hung up, I heard the faint sound of the water shutting off upstairs. I smiled faintly. Peace, even temporary, was something worth savoring. But peace is a fragile thing. A sharp noise outside drew my attention. Headlights swept across the front window, then vanished. I peeked through the curtains. A car was parked across the street. Same model, same dark color as the one I'd seen before outside Emily's house. My heart began to race. Was it paranoia? Or had Travis already noticed she was gone? I stepped outside quietly, my phone in hand. The car idled for a moment, then sped off into the night. No plates visible. I stood there under the streetlight, the cool air filling my lungs. I knew what that was, a warning, a reminder. Men like him didn't surrender control easily. When I went back inside, Emily was already asleep on the couch, curled under a blanket, her breathing soft and steady. I sat beside her and brushed a strand of hair from her face, tears stinging my eyes. She looked so peaceful, so much like the little girl I used to tuck in after nightmares. But this time, the nightmare wasn't a bad dream. It was real, and it wasn't over yet, because sometimes, even when you escape the storm, the thunder follows you home. Travis came in smiling, but his eyes darted between us. It was the following morning, and I had just poured Emily a cup of coffee when his car pulled into the driveway. My stomach dropped. The restraining order wasn't supposed to be served until noon, and yet here he was, earlier than anyone expected. Emily froze, the color draining from her face. "Mom, what do we do?" she whispered. "Stay calm," I said firmly. "Go to the kitchen. Don't say a word." He knocked once, then opened the door without waiting. That small act told me everything. He still believed he had the right to walk into her life uninvited. "Well, this is a surprise," I said, keeping my tone steady even though my pulse was thundering in my ears. "We weren't expecting company." Travis stepped inside, his smile thin and brittle. "Yeah. Well, I realized Emily forgot her wallet. Thought I'd drop it off." His eyes swept the room too long on the packed bag by the couch, too quick to glance away when he noticed me standing between him and Emily. "She's fine," I said calmly. "We were just having breakfast before heading out." He looked at Emily, and for a brief second, his charm vanished. His voice dropped low, controlled but sharp. "You didn't tell me you were staying here." Emily's voice shook. "I needed some space, Travis." His jaw tightened. We could have talked about that. Talking meant something very different to him than it did to normal people. I could see the tension building, the same quiet rage I'd witnessed in too many abusers during interrogations. I took a small step forward, blocking his path without making it obvious. "Travis," I said softly, "this isn't the time or place. Emily needs a little distance. And that's perfectly normal." He looked at me then. Really looked. And something in his expression changed. He realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. "I see," he said after a pause, his tone flattening. "So, now you're speaking for her?" "I'm helping her speak for herself," I replied. For a moment, I thought he might explode. His nostrils flared, and his fists twitched, but he forced a smile instead. "You've always been protective, Margaret. Maybe too protective." I didn't flinch. A mother's job never ends. He lingered a moment longer, eyes flicking toward the door as if weighing his options. I could practically see the calculations behind his gaze. How far could he push without crossing a line? Then he smiled again, that practiced grin that never reached his eyes. All right then, I'll let you two have your girl time. He turned and walked out, closing the door a little too softly. The moment his car pulled away, Emily burst into tears. I wrapped my arms around her, holding her tight until her shaking eased. He knows, she whispered. He knows I'm leaving him. I know, I said quietly. That's why we're not waiting until noon. Within minutes, I had us packed and in the car. We drove straight to the station, where Detective Carter met us in the lobby, his expression grim. You were right to come early, he said after hearing what happened. He's getting desperate. We'll have the order expedited immediately. He led us into a private office where Emily signed the final documents. Watching her hand tremble as she put her name on the paper broke my heart and healed it at the same time. That signature was the first step toward freedom. After the paperwork, Carter leaned against the desk. We'll send officers to keep an eye on your place for the Dan. Next few days, he said. If he shows up again, call me directly. I nodded. Thank you, Ron. He looked at me with a faint smile. You were always one of the good ones, Margaret. It's good to see you back in action, even if it's personal this time. Just doing what I have to, I said quietly. That afternoon, Emily moved into my house officially. I made up the guest room for her, though she insisted on sleeping in the room next to mine. She said it helped her feel safe. I didn't argue. We spent the evening sorting through her things, deciding what to keep and what to leave behind. Most of her belongings were still at that house, but we had the essentials, documents, photos, her grandmother's locket. The rest could wait. When night came, she finally began to relax. We sat on the porch under a blanket, sipping tea as the crickets sang in the dark. Mom, she said softly, do you think people like him ever change? I thought about it for a long time before answering. Some want to, I said, most don't, and that's not your burden to carry. You're not here to fix him. You're here to heal yourself. She nodded slowly, her eyes shining in the porch light. I don't even know who I am anymore, I smiled gently. Then let's find her together. It was a small sentence, but it carried a promise, a new beginning built not on fear, but on hope. Later, when Emily went to bed, I sat alone in the living room, listening to the house settle. My mind wandered back to the sound of Travis's voice at the door, to that threatening calmness that had haunted too many victims before. I knew he wasn't done. Abusers rarely let go easily. But this time, he wasn't dealing with a frightened woman who felt trapped. He was dealing with a mother who knew the system, who had allies, and who wasn't afraid to use every resource the law allowed to protect her child. I pulled my old badge out of the drawer. It was tarnished, the engraving faint, but the weight of it still meant something. It wasn't just a reminder of who I used to be, it was a promise of what I still stood for. I didn't need a uniform to protect my daughter. I just needed my resolve, and that was something no man could ever break. I opened my old storage trunk for the first time in years. It sat at the back of my closet, buried under spare blankets and boxes of old photos, untouched since the day I'd retired. I'd thought I'd never open it again, that part of my life was over. But as I lifted the lid and the faint scent of leather and starch filled the room, I realized this wasn't about reliving the past. It was about reclaiming a part of myself that I'd tucked away the day I hung up the badge. Inside, neatly folded and still pressed, was my uniform. The navy blue fabric was a little stiff from years of storage. The patches faded. But when I ran my hand across it, I felt strength. I didn't need to wear it to act, but seeing it again reminded me who I was. Someone who never ran from the hard things. I sat on the floor beside the trunk, the memories flooding back. Long nights on patrol. Interviews with victims who thought no one would believe them. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that, at least once in a while, justice had a voice. Emily knocked softly on the door. Mom? I quickly wiped my eyes and smiled up at her. Come in, sweetheart. She stepped inside, her hair still damp from her shower, wearing one of my oversized sweaters. Her eyes fell on the open trunk, and for a moment, she just stared. You kept it. Couldn't quite let go, I said. Some things stay with you whether you plan to or not. She sat down beside me, resting her head on my shoulder. I wish I'd been brave like you. You are brave, Emily. You survived something no one should ever have to endure, and you're still standing. That's courage. She was quiet for a long time, before whispering, I don't want to be afraid anymore. I squeezed her hand. You won't be. We're going to make sure of that. After she went to bed, I found myself still sitting there, staring at the uniform. I didn't need it to walk into a station or file a report. But seeing it there reminded me of what justice looked like when it wasn't just words on paper, it was action, integrity, protection. So, I folded it carefully and placed it on a chair by my desk, not as armor, but as motivation. The next day, I drove to the precinct to meet Carter. I hadn't been there in years, but the moment I walked through those glass doors, it felt familiar. The faint hum of voices, the clicking of keyboards, the scent of coffee that had been sitting too long on a burner. Carter spotted me immediately and waved me into his office. You look like you haven't aged a day, he joked. Flattery doesn't work on me, Ron, I said with a smile. He grinned. All right, fair enough. Let's talk business. We've got the restraining order served and the warrant in motion. He's not allowed within 100 yards of either of you. We've also got his financials under review. The DA's office is looking into potential fraud charges. I felt something inside me unclench. Finally, steps that meant something. And Emily? She's protected, for now, he said, his tone shifting serious. But I'll be honest, these guys rarely go quietly. Keep your phone on you. We'll have a patrol swing by your place twice a day until we know more. Appreciate it, I said. Carter hesitated before adding, You sure you're okay doing this again? Getting involved like this. It's heavy, Margaret. I looked him in the eye. I'm not doing this as a cop, Ron. I'm doing it as a mother. He nodded slowly, understanding. When I got home, Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, sketching something in a notebook. She looked up as I entered. How'd it go? Better than expected, I said, setting my purse down. They're on it. It's not over, but we've got the law on our side now. Her smile was small but real. Thank you, Mom, for everything. I reached out, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You don't have to thank me for doing what's right. That evening, I noticed how different the house felt. The tension wasn't gone. Not completely. But something had shifted. Emily laughed for the first time in what felt like forever, really laughed. The kind of laugh that came from the chest, not the throat. It filled the kitchen, warm and light, and for a moment, the house felt like home again. After she went to bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea. The moonlight pooled softly across the floor. My eyes drifted to the uniform hanging on the chair beside me, and I smiled faintly. I didn't need to wear it to be who I was. The strength it represented was already in me. But seeing it there reminded me that the woman who'd once fought for others hadn't disappeared, she'd just been waiting for a reason to fight again. I glanced toward Emily's closed door, hearing her soft breathing from down the hall. That reason was asleep under my roof, finally safe. I knew there were still storms ahead. There always are when you stand up to people who build their power on fear. But I wasn't afraid of the fight, not anymore. Because the badge might have come off, but the protector in me never would. And that night, as I turned off the lights and let the quiet fill the house, I knew the next battle wouldn't be about revenge, it would be about rebuilding. I was already wide awake when the phone rang. It was early morning, barely past 6, and the sound sliced through the silence of the house. Emily stirred from her room, half asleep, her voice small. Mom, is everything okay? Stay in bed, I told her gently, already reaching for the phone. It was Carter. Morning, Margaret. We've got a situation, he said, his tone crisp. Travis was served yesterday, but he didn't take it well. He showed up at his office last night, yelling that someone was setting him up. We're increasing surveillance, but I want you two to be extra cautious. I glanced toward the front window, the soft gray of dawn filtering through the curtains. Understood, I said. We'll stay alert. Good. I'll check in later. Call me if anything feels off, no hesitation. After I hung up, I brewed coffee, trying to steady my nerves. Emily appeared in the doorway, pale but calm. It's about him, isn't it? I nodded. He's angry, but we've got people watching. We're safe. She sat down at the table, holding her cup between both hands. Sometimes I still expect him to walk through the door. You won't have to feel that way forever, I promised. But we'll take it one day at a time. I meant every word, though inside, I could still feel the undercurrent of worry. Abusers often escalated when they lost control. The restraining order wasn't a shield, it was a line he might try to cross. That's why I had to be ready. I spent the next few days reinforcing our safety net. I installed new locks, motion sensor lights, and a small camera near the porch. I taught Emily how to call for help immediately and keep her phone charged at all times. We also worked with Carter's team to set up a safety plan: where to go, who to contact, how to document any violations. Every step made Emily a little stronger. She wasn't just being protected anymore, she was learning how to protect herself. On the fourth evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I caught movement outside. A car parked half a block down, engine running, lights off. I didn't panic. Instead, I quietly took my phone and began recording. After a minute, I called Carter. "He's here," I said. His voice was firm. "Stay inside. Officers are on the way." I peeked through the blinds, watching as the car idled. My old training kicked in. I noted the make, model, license plate, and even the driver's silhouette. Every detail mattered. Emily came into the room whispering, "Is it him?" "I think so," I said softly. "But we're not alone this time." Within 15 minutes, headlights flashed across the street. 2 patrol cars rolled up silently, their blue lights flickering only after they'd boxed in the suspect's vehicle. The man inside tried to back up, but the officers were faster. Emily clung to my arm as they approached the car. When they opened the door, I recognized him instantly, even from this distance. Travis. His perfect composure was gone. He looked wild, cornered. Carter himself arrived moments later, his expression a mix of frustration and relief. He came to the porch and said quietly, "You did the right thing calling me. We caught him violating the order." Emily trembled beside me. "Will they take him to jail?" "Yes," Carter said. "And this time? It won't be a warning. He's made his choice." As they drove Travis away, Emily exhaled shakily, almost like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. "It's really over, isn't it?" she whispered. "For now," I said gently, resting my hand over hers. "But what matters is you didn't run, you stood up for yourself. That's how you win." That night, we didn't celebrate. But we didn't cry either. We just sat together in the living room, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. There was peace, uneasy, fragile, but real. When Emily finally went to bed, I stayed up, writing notes for Carter's report. Every detail mattered. Every action would help build the case that kept her safe. It wasn't about vengeance anymore, it was about accountability. As I worked, I looked up and saw my reflection in the window, the faint outline of a woman older, tired, but still, standing tall. For the first time in a long time, I didn't see someone who'd lost control of her family. I saw a protector who had done what she was trained to do: gather evidence, follow procedure, and ensure justice was done the right way. The following morning, Carter called again. "He's in custody," he said. "No bail this time. We've got multiple violations, and his employer's pressing fraud charges based on the documents you turned over." "You did good, Margaret." I closed my eyes and let out a deep breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "It wasn't just me," I said. "Emily's the one who had the courage to come forward." "She's lucky to have you," he replied. After I hung up, I went to the kitchen and found Emily already there, making breakfast. She smiled weakly when she saw me. "I heard you talking to Carter," she said. "So, it's really over this time?" I nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, you're free." She leaned against the counter, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in months. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted. "It feels strange to be safe." I walked over and hugged her, holding her tight. "Then we'll learn together. Healing takes time. But this is where it begins." Later that day, as sunlight streamed through the kitchen window, I folded the last of the documents into a folder labeled "closed case." The words didn't mean the pain was gone, but they meant progress. Emily joined me at the table with her notebook. "I've been thinking," she said quietly. "Maybe I could talk to someone like a counselor, and maybe, when I'm ready, I could help others like me. Tell my story." I smiled. "That's the strongest thing you could do." As she spoke, I realized something profound. What began as a mission to protect her had become something bigger, a story of recovery, of rediscovering strength through truth. And for the first time since that terrible phone call, I believed that our lives weren't defined by what he did. They were defined by how we chose to rise after it. Just when I thought the worst was behind us, the ground shifted again. A few peaceful days passed after Travis's arrest. Emily began sleeping through the night, and the air in the house finally felt breathable. We cooked dinner together, watched old movies, and tried to rebuild something resembling normal. Each day without his shadow felt like sunlight creeping back into a cold room. But peace, I've learned, is fragile. And danger doesn't always knock, it lingers quietly, waiting for your guard to drop. On the 5th morning, Carter called. "Margaret," he said, his voice tight. "I need to update you. Travis was transferred to county jail. But there's a problem." My heart skipped. "What kind of problem?" "Paperwork. His bail hearing was delayed, but the system flagged an error. Someone tried to post bail on his behalf last night using cash. The person refused to give a name." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You think it's one of his relatives?" "Possibly," Carter said. "We're investigating. For now, assume he's still behind bars, but don't relax just yet." After the call, I sat quietly at the kitchen table. Emily was still asleep upstairs. I wanted to believe we were safe, but that flicker of doubt refused to die. I'd seen it before in other cases, the moments right before everything unraveled again. I decided not to tell Emily right away. She deserved a few more hours of peace. Instead, I drove to the police station to meet Carter in person. He looked exhausted, coffee cup in hand, dark circles under his eyes. "The DA's working on stacking the financial charges," he said. "That'll keep him off the streets even if someone posts bail. But I've seen men like him. Control isn't something they surrender easily." "I know," I said softly. "That's what worries me." He handed me a small device, a personal alarm. "Keep this on you." Loud as a siren. "If he or anyone you don't recognize comes near the house, press it. And call me directly, not 911. I took it without argument. "Thanks, Ron." When I got home, I found Emily sitting at the table, her laptop open and a half-finished cup of tea beside her. She looked up as I walked in. "You went out?" "Just errands," I said carefully. "Everything okay here?" She hesitated. "I thought I heard something last night, like footsteps by the porch." I looked out the window, but it was too dark. I froze. "You didn't see anyone?" She shook her head. "No. Maybe it was just an animal." I wanted to believe that, but the look in her eyes told me she didn't. That evening, I made sure all the locks were double-checked, every window secured. I set my phone beside my bed and left the hallway light on. Sleep didn't come easily. Every sound, every creak of the house had me listening hard. Just after midnight, a faint noise jolted me upright. Not from inside, outside, a slow, deliberate crunch of gravel. I slipped out of bed, heart pounding, and peered through the curtain. A figure moved near the mailbox, too tall, too still to be random. I grabbed my phone and recorded, zooming in as much as the dark would allow. Then I pressed the alarm Carter had given me. A shrill, piercing wail tore through the night air, echoing down the quiet street. The figure froze, then bolted toward a dark sedan parked under the trees. I caught the outline of the license plate, half obscured by mud, as the car sped away. Within minutes, headlights filled the street. A patrol car stopped in front of the house, and an officer came to the door. I recognized him from Carter's team. "You did the right thing, ma'am," he said. "We'll run the footage and see if we can match the plate." Emily appeared on the stairs, eyes wide, clutching a blanket. "Mom, what happened?" "It's okay," I said softly. "He's gone. The police are handling it." She trembled, and I wrapped my arms around her. I'm so tired of being scared, she whispered. I know, sweetheart, but you're not powerless anymore. You called for help. You fought back. That matters. The next morning, Carter showed up in person, his face set in grim determination. We pulled the partial plate from your video, he said. It matches a vehicle registered to his cousin. We're filing an additional protective order against the family. Looks like they've been trying to intimidate you. Will it hold? I asked. It will, he said firmly. Between this and the fraud case, Travis won't have many allies left. Emily stood beside me, listening quietly. I don't want to be defined by this anymore. Carter's gaze softened. You're not. You're surviving it, and that's something he can't take from you. After he left, Emily sat down on the couch and stared out the window for a long time. The morning sun bathed her face in gold, and for the first time, I saw strength where there used to be fear. She turned to me and said, You know, maybe I want to help other women one day. The ones who don't think they can leave. I smiled. You already are. We spent the rest of the day cleaning, organizing, reclaiming the small joys he'd stolen, music playing softly, laughter returning bit by bit. Every normal moment was an act of defiance against the darkness that had once ruled her life. That night, as I locked the front door, I looked out into the quiet street where danger had once crept. The fear wasn't gone completely, but it no longer owned us. Because while monsters might return to the shadows, they never win when the truth stands in the light. For 2 weeks, peace returned, or so I thought. The house began to feel alive again. Emily started volunteering at the local community center, helping organize food drives. She'd come home in the afternoons with a faint glow in her cheeks, the kind of warmth I hadn't seen in years. The shadows under her eyes were fading, replaced by something close to hope. Every night we cooked dinner together, simple meals that filled the air with laughter and the smell of garlic and rosemary. For the first time, we were learning how to live without fear. Still, there was a quiet awareness that lingered in the background. I checked the locks each night. Emily kept her phone beside her bed. We didn't talk about Travis often, but his absence hung between us like the echo of a storm that hadn't quite passed. Then one evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, I noticed something odd. A car I didn't recognize parked across the street. Engine running, headlights off. It wasn't the same one from before. This was newer, darker. But it stayed there for hours. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe someone was lost, or waiting for a friend. But the longer it sat there, the more the unease grew. I didn't tell Emily that night. She was finally starting to breathe again, and I didn't want to pull her back into fear. Instead, I took a quiet photo of the car's plate and texted it to Carter. He responded within minutes. We'll run it. Probably nothing. But keep your doors locked. His calm tone was meant to reassure, but it didn't help much. The next morning, the car was gone. I tried to convince myself it was coincidence, but deep down, I knew better. A few days later, I found out Carter had been right to worry. He called while I was at the grocery store. Margaret. That plate came back registered to a rental under a fake name. Whoever rented it used a prepaid card. I don't want to alarm you, but it fits a pattern we've seen before, people trying to monitor witnesses. I felt a cold chill crawl up my spine. You think it's connected to Travis? Can't prove it yet, he said, but stay cautious. I'm assigning a patrol to your block until we sort this out. When I told Emily, her face went pale. So, he's still trying to find us? Maybe not him, I said quickly. Maybe someone helping him. But the important thing is we're not helpless. We have support, we have protection. She nodded, though her eyes shimmered with tears. I just don't want to live like this forever. You won't, I promised. You're already doing better than you think. That night, I noticed how she kept glancing toward the window. The fear was back, not as paralyzing as before, but sharp enough to cut. I realized then how fragile recovery was. One wrong move, one shadow, and it all came rushing back. To help her focus on something positive, I suggested we start a garden in the backyard. Something new to care for, I said. She smiled faintly. Something that grows. We spent the next few days digging, planting herbs and flowers. It felt symbolic: roots, growth, light. The simple act of turning soil and watching greens sprout was healing. But the peace didn't last. One afternoon, Emily came home early from the community center, her hands trembling. "Mom," she whispered. "Someone called the front desk asking about me." My chest tightened. "What did they say?" "They asked what time I usually leave. Said they were a friend trying to surprise me." "Did anyone give them that information?" She shook her head. "No. But the woman at the desk said the call didn't sound friendly." She hung up right away. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "You did the right thing, telling me. I'll handle it." That night, I sat at my desk, going through my notes. Every report, every record, every message from Carter. I wasn't looking for patterns, I already knew the pattern. It was the same I'd seen 100 times before as a cop. An abuser who refused to accept loss of control. But this time, the target wasn't a stranger on my caseload. It was my daughter. The next morning, Carter came by the house. He brought 2 uniformed officers with him and installed a small camera near the front porch. "This one sends live footage straight to my office," he explained. "If anyone steps foot near this door, we'll know." Emily stood beside me, watching silently. "I hate that it's come to this," she said softly. "I know," I replied. "But it's protection, not punishment." Carter nodded. "The system works best when we stay proactive. You both are doing everything right." After he left, Emily sat by the window, tracing the steam on her mug with her finger. "Mom, what if it never ends? What if there's always another person waiting? Another phone call? Another car?" I reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we face each one together. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's the choice to keep living in spite of it." She looked at me for a long moment before whispering, "You sound like you're still on duty." I smiled faintly. "Maybe I am." That night, the house was quiet again. The camera light blinked steadily outside, a tiny reassurance in the dark. Emily slept soundly for the first time in days, her breathing even, her face peaceful. I stayed awake, watching the shadows drift across the wall. I didn't know what would come next, but I knew one thing for certain. Whatever storm was brewing, we were ready. Because we weren't just survivors anymore. We were a team stronger than the fear that tried to find us. And as I sat there in the stillness, I realized that true calm isn't the absence of danger, it's the confidence that you can face it when it comes. I decided it was time to stop waiting for fear to knock. For weeks, I'd been reacting, responding to threats, hiding behind reinforced doors, calling Carter when things felt off. But that wasn't how I lived when I wore the badge, and it wasn't how I wanted Emily to live now. Fear had taken enough from her. It was time to take something back, not revenge, but control. I started by reviewing the footage from the security camera Carter installed. Most nights were quiet. But one clip from 2 evenings prior caught my eye. A man standing by the mailbox at 2 a.m., face hidden under a hood. He wasn't close enough to trigger the motion light, but the camera caught his outline as he took something from his pocket, then left quickly, looking over his shoulder. I went outside that morning to check. There, wedged under the mailbox flap, was an envelope with no return address. I didn't touch it with bare hands, old habits die hard. I used a paper towel to pick it up and slipped it into a plastic bag. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "You think you're safe, you're not." No signature. No fingerprints. Just 7 words that made my stomach twist. When Carter arrived later that day, I handed him the bag. "He's getting bolder," I said quietly. He studied the note. "Or desperate. But you did the right thing. We'll process it and check for prints." Emily sat at the kitchen table, pale but determined. "What if it's not him?" she asked. "What if someone's trying to scare us into running?" "That's possible," Carter said. "But either way, they're breaking the law, and they'll make a mistake sooner or later. People like this always do." After he left, I sat with Emily for a long time. She stared at the blank space on the table where the envelope had been, then said softly, "I'm tired of being the one who's afraid, Mom." I nodded. "Then let's turn that fear into preparation. That's what keeps us safe." Together, we came up with a plan. Nothing reckless, just smart, careful, lawful steps to stay one step ahead. I adjusted the camera angles to capture the street from multiple directions. I also installed another one on the side fence where the hooded man had passed. Before, I shared all the footage directly with Carter's office. Then I taught Emily some of the basic safety tactics I'd learned years ago. How to stay alert in public spaces, how to identify exits, how to recognize when she was being followed. I watched her absorb each detail like someone reclaiming her agency one step at a time. That evening, as I brewed tea, she looked at me and smiled faintly. "I feel like I'm in one of your training stories," I laughed softly. "Not quite. But it's the same idea, knowing what to do gives you power." Later that night, I stayed awake on the couch, watching the live feed from the security app on my phone. The street was quiet, the moon full and silver over the rooftops. Hours passed without movement. I was beginning to doze when I noticed headlights slowly approach from the far end of the block. The car stopped in front of our house, the engine idled. My heartbeat quickened. I quietly texted Carter. "He's back, front street, dark sedan." He replied almost instantly, "Stay inside. Officers en route." Through the blinds, I watched the figure step out of the car. Same hooded shape as before, but this time, I could see his face briefly illuminated by the dashboard light. It wasn't Travis. He was younger, maybe early 20s. That didn't ease the dread in my chest. He walked toward the mailbox again. But this time, he glanced straight at the camera as if he knew it was there. I hit the panic button on the alarm system. The sound slicing through the night like a siren. Emily rushed down the stairs, eyes wide, clutching her phone. "What's happening?" "Stay behind me," I said firmly, stepping in front of her. "Police are on the way." The man froze, then bolted toward his car. Within minutes, red and blue lights painted the street. Officers intercepted the vehicle at the corner before it could turn away. Carter arrived moments later, his expression a mix of relief and concern. "You, all right?" I nodded. "Who is he?" "One of Travis's former co-workers," he said grimly. "Claims he was just doing a favor, dropping off a message. But he's talking. We'll get the truth." Emily stood beside me, trembling but steady. "What message?" Carter sighed. "We'll confirm, but it sounds like Travis has been contacting people from jail trying to send threats indirectly. He's digging his own grave." When the police finally left, Emily and I sat together in the quiet house, exhaustion weighing on us both. "Mom," she whispered, "I thought I'd never feel safe again. But now I think I finally understand what safety really means." "What's that?" I asked softly. "It's not about walls or locks or cameras. It's about knowing you're not alone." Her words settled deep in my chest. She was right. Safety wasn't the absence of danger, it was the presence of people who stood with you when danger came. The next morning, Carter called to confirm that the man they caught had confessed. Travis had asked him to deliver letters, but the coworker hadn't known the full story. With this violation, the DA had enough to file new charges that would keep Travis incarcerated indefinitely. When I told Emily, she let out a long, shaky breath. "So that's it? He can't reach us anymore?" "Not this time," I said. She smiled faintly, tears welling in her eyes. "Then maybe I can finally stop looking over my shoulder." I hugged her close, feeling the tension ease from both our bodies. And for the first time, I didn't feel like we were hiding from the storm, we were standing in it, unshaken, knowing we'd built something strong enough to withstand it. When the gavel struck, the sound felt like air returning to our lungs. It had been almost 6 months since that first desperate phone call from Emily. And now we were sitting in a courtroom that finally felt like the end of something dark. The fluorescent lights were harsh, but the atmosphere was calm, an air of order after so much chaos. Travis sat at the defendant's table, thinner than I remembered, his once perfect posture replaced with slouching arrogance. He avoided looking at Emily, which was just as well. She didn't need to see the man who'd tried to control her. She was here to see him held accountable. The prosecutor laid everything out piece by piece, the financial documents, the threatening letters, the violations of his restraining order. Carter's testimony was steady and factual, never emotional, but I could feel his quiet anger beneath each word. When it was Emily's turn to speak, the courtroom fell silent. She took a deep breath and stood. "My name is Emily Carter," she said, her voice trembling at first, then strengthening. "For years I lived in fear of someone who said he loved me, but I'm not here to talk about fear anymore. I'm here to talk about survival and about everyone who made sure I could stand here today." She glanced at me, her eyes wet but fierce. I used to think leaving meant I'd failed. But I learned that leaving is what saved me. Her words echoed in the room, quiet and powerful. Even the judge leaned forward slightly, as if listening not just with his ears but with his heart. When the verdict came, it was clear and final. Guilty on all counts: financial fraud, harassment, multiple restraining order violations. The sentence: 10 years with no early release. Emily gripped my hand as the judge read the decision. Her tears were silent, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were relief, years of pain finally finding a full stop. Across the room, Travis's jaw tightened. He glanced toward us, his eyes full of the same cold resentment that had always been there. But this time, it had no power. There was glass between him and the world he could no longer reach. Carter met us in the hallway afterward. He looked tired, but there was a faint smile under his mustache. "You both did good," he said quietly. "You stayed strong, and you stayed smart. That's what made this possible." Emily hugged him, something she hadn't been able to do in months. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. He nodded. It's easy to believe the truth when someone's brave enough to tell it. As we left the courthouse, the sky outside was a clear, brilliant blue, the kind of day that felt like a new beginning. I looked at Emily and saw the same thought written across her face. We made it. The following weeks passed quietly. Life began to take shape again, not around fear, but around small moments of peace. Emily started therapy, working with a counselor who specialized in trauma recovery. At first, the sessions were hard. She came home some days with red eyes and shaking hands. But gradually, she began to talk about her future, not just her past. She started volunteering again, this time with a domestic support organization. The first night she spoke at a survivors meeting, she asked me to come. I sat in the back, watching as she stood in front of a small group of women. Her voice was steady, her story raw but full of hope. "You don't owe your silence to anyone," she told them. "The moment you speak, you begin to heal." When the meeting ended, women lined up to thank her, some crying, some just holding her hand in quiet understanding. Watching her, I realized that the very thing that had tried to break her was now giving her purpose. Later, we sat on the porch under the evening sky. The cicadas hummed softly, and for once there was nothing to guard against. "Do you ever think about him?" I asked gently. She thought for a moment. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But not like before. It's strange, Mom, I don't feel hate anymore, I just feel done." "That's strength," I said, "not letting the anger own you." She smiled faintly. "I learned that from you." I looked out at the horizon, thinking of all the nights I'd stayed awake, ready to fight shadows. Maybe it wasn't the badge or the training that had saved her. Maybe it was something simpler: love, persistence, belief. A week later, we received a letter from the court confirming the final sentencing. The official seal felt symbolic closure made tangible. Emily framed it and placed it on a shelf in her study. Not as a trophy, but as a reminder of what it took to get there. She told me once that it helped her remember she wasn't powerless anymore. Sometimes I'd still wake in the night, expecting to hear something outside, but the world stayed still. Those nights, I'd walk quietly down the hall, peek into Emily's room, and find her sleeping peacefully. It was all the proof I needed that we'd made it through. Justice didn't erase what happened, but it gave us the space to start again. And for a woman who'd spent her life chasing justice for others, there was something profoundly humbling about finally seeing it come home. Because justice isn't just about punishment, it's about the freedom to live again without fear. Emily began to rediscover herself. It started with small things that seemed ordinary but were monumental in meaning. She painted her bedroom a soft shade of sage green. She started journaling again, something she hadn't done since college. She even bought a new coffee mug, just because it made her smile in the mornings. Little by little, she was reclaiming the pieces of her life that had once been buried under fear. I watched quietly, never rushing her process. Healing, I'd learned, doesn't happen in a straight line. Some days she laughed easily, others she went quiet for hours, lost in thought. But there was progress, and that was enough. One afternoon, she came home from a counseling session carrying a small packet of papers. "Homework," she said with a faint smile. "My therapist wants me to write a letter to myself. Me that's here now. But the me who was still stuck back then." I felt a lump form in my throat. "That's powerful," I said softly. She nodded. "It's hard, though. I don't even recognize that version of me anymore. She feels like a stranger." "That's a good thing, sweetheart," I told her. "It means you've grown beyond her." Over the next few weeks, I watched her find her footing again. She started running in the mornings, something she'd always loved before the marriage. She reconnected with old friends, cautiously at first, then with genuine joy. And slowly, laughter began to fill the house again, the kind of laughter that didn't sound forced or fragile. She even began taking online classes in social work, wanting to help others who'd gone through what she had. "If I can help even one person feel less alone," she said one evening, "then maybe everything I went through won't feel wasted." I smiled at her over my cup of tea. That's the heart of real strength, Emily, not revenge, not resentment. Just purpose. Sometimes, I still caught glimpses of the old fear in her eyes when the phone rang unexpectedly, or when a car slowed down near the house, but those moments passed faster each time. And each time, she recovered a little quicker, her breathing steadier, her confidence firmer. We also made changes around the house, not out of fear, but out of intention. We planted a new garden together, this time not to fill time or distract ourselves, but as a symbol of renewal. Rows of lavender, rosemary, and marigolds filled the backyard. The smell of fresh soil and sunlight became a kind of therapy neither of us had known we needed. While we worked, Emily told me something that stayed with me. "You know what I realized, Mom? When you helped me leave, I thought you were rescuing me. But now I see you were just showing me how to rescue myself." I smiled, blinking back tears. "Maybe both," I said. "Sometimes we need a hand to stand up before we can walk on our own." The months passed gently, the world around us moved on, and so did we. The courthouse letters stopped coming, the phone calls quieted, and the nights felt safe again. We celebrated her birthday that spring, her first one free in years. She invited friends over, cooked her favorite meal, and filled the house with music. At one point during the evening, I caught her standing near the window, watching the guests with a soft smile. She looked peaceful, radiant even. When she noticed me, she said, "You know, I never thought I'd feel like this again." "Like what?" I asked. "Like myself." That night, after everyone left, we sat on the porch wrapped in blankets. The air was cool and full of the scent of blooming jasmine. "Mom," she said quietly, "do you ever regret leaving the force?" I thought about it for a long moment. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But then I look at you, and I realize maybe everything I learned back then was meant for this. For protecting you. For helping you find your way." She reached over and took my hand. "You did more than protect me. You believed me. You never made me feel weak." Her words sank deep. For years, I'd carried guilt for not noticing sooner, for not preventing what happened. But in that moment, I realized that the past didn't need to define me, either. I wasn't the cop who failed to see the signs. I was the mother who helped her daughter rise again. Later that week, Emily framed her letter to her past self. It hung in her study beside the court documents. I read it when she wasn't home, each line a reflection of how far she'd come. "To the woman I used to be, you survived what was meant to break you. You don't owe your silence to anyone. The world is still full of good people, and you are one of them." I stood there for a long time, reading those words over and over, letting them wash through me. They weren't just her truth, they were ours. Now, when I walk through the house, it doesn't feel haunted anymore. The walls no longer echo with memories of fear. Instead, they hum with laughter, with music, with peace. Some evenings, Emily still sits by the window, watching the sunset. And I know she's not looking for danger anymore, she's looking toward her future. And in her strength, I see not the girl I once rescued, but the woman I helped empower, the proof that healing is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new one. A year later, I received a letter from prison addressed to me. It was a gray Tuesday morning, quiet, calm, uneventful. The kind of day that feels like a clean page. The envelope sat in the mailbox among bills and catalogs. The handwriting stopped me cold. I knew it immediately. Sharp, angular letters. Controlled. Calculated. Travis. For a moment, I stood there on the porch, holding it like something that might burn me. I could have tossed it in the trash right then. But closure, I realized, sometimes means facing what's left on your own terms. So I took it inside, sat at the kitchen table, and slit the envelope open. The letter was exactly what I expected, full of blame, bitterness, and denial. He accused me of ruining his life, said Emily had twisted the truth, and claimed he was the victim of a system that took sides. He even wrote that I had poisoned his wife against him. Not once did he say he was sorry. I read the whole thing only once. Then I folded it neatly, placed it back in the envelope, and set it beside a lit candle on the table. When the flame caught, the paper curled and blackened, words disappearing into smoke. I watched it until it was nothing but ash. Emily came downstairs just as I opened the window to let the smoke drift out. "What was that?" she asked gently. "An old chapter," I said. "One that's finally over." She looked at me for a long moment, understanding dawning in her eyes. Then she smiled. Good. Life had become soft again. Predictable in the best way. Emily's classes in social work were going well. She'd even been offered an internship with the local women's shelter. I'd taken up volunteering there too, teaching self-protection courses and helping with case paperwork. It felt like my skills had found their purpose again, not in enforcing the law, but in empowering others to stand on their own. Every time a woman walked through those shelter doors frightened, broken, unsure, I saw pieces of my daughter in them. And every time one of them left standing taller, I saw Emily's reflection again, bright and unafraid. One afternoon, after one of those classes, Emily and I sat in the community garden she helped create. Rows of vegetables and flowers bloomed in neat harmony, tended by women whose lives had been messy and painful but were now blossoming into something strong and alive. She looked around, smiling softly. "You know, I used to think healing meant forgetting," she said. "But I think it really means remembering just without the pain." I nodded. "You can't erase what happened, but you can change what it means." She picked a small daisy and twirled it between her fingers. "Do you ever think about him?" "Not anymore," I said honestly. "I think about you. About how far we've come." She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. "Sometimes I still wonder why it happened. Why people like him exist." I sighed, brushing a hand through her hair. "There's no answer that makes sense, sweetheart. Some people hurt others because they can't face their own emptiness. But that's their burden, not ours." That evening, we invited Carter over for dinner. A small celebration of everything we'd overcome. He looked more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, laughing as Emily served her favorite chicken and herb pasta. "To new beginnings," he said, raising his glass. "To peace," I added. Emily smiled. "And to strength, the kind we didn't know we had." After dinner, Carter pulled me aside on the porch. "You did good, Margaret," he said quietly. "Not just as a mother, but as a survivor in your own right. You could have walked away after the arrest, but you didn't. You turned it into something bigger." I looked out at the garden, where Emily was laughing under the string lights. "I didn't do it alone," I said. "We built it together." He nodded approvingly. That's what justice looks like when it works, people rebuilding what was broken. Later that night, as I closed up the house, I noticed the old uniform hanging neatly in the closet. I hadn't worn it once since the day Emily came home. But now, instead of symbolizing a life left behind, it represented everything we'd reclaimed: courage, service, and purpose. I ran my hand across the badge, polished from years of touch, and smiled. Emily joined me in the hallway, watching quietly. "You ever miss it?" "Sometimes," I admitted. "But I think I'm still wearing it, in a way. Not on my sleeve, but in here." I placed my hand over my heart. She smiled. "Then maybe I got it from you." We both laughed softly, the kind of laughter that doesn't come from joy alone but from gratitude, the kind that grows only after surviving something that could have destroyed you. Outside, the night air was cool and peaceful. The garden lights swayed gently in the breeze, their glow soft and steady. I stood there for a long moment, breathing it in. The silence didn't feel empty anymore, it felt earned. Travis would serve his sentence, and one day, he'd walk out into a world that had moved on without him. But that didn't matter. He'd never really be free, not in the way Emily was now. Because freedom isn't about bars or walls, it's about peace. And that was something he'd never understand. I closed the door, turned off the lights, and looked at Emily one last time before heading to bed. Because sometimes, being a mother means being a warrior, but the truest victory is when you no longer have to fight,